الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. من مسجد الأمة بهاليفاكس كندا نحييكم بتحية الإسلام، فسلام الله عليكم ورحمته وبركاته. وبعد, this is the second segment in a new series, a series that has been suggested by our beloved Imam Sheikh Abdullah Yusri, to deal with some of the shubuhat or difficult questions as a series by itself, even though some aspects of those issues have been covered or may be covered in the future, inshallah, in some other programs. The title that was used is Dealing with Difficult Questions. That's the broad title of the entire series. This is the second segment, even though the first segment was 2 weeks ago. But as those who live in Halifax realize, last Friday was quite, we had a snowstorm and driving was quite hazardous. So it is the second, even though it is 2 weeks apart from the first one. The topic is very important, very delicate, and I found it useful in view of the fact that many people did not even see the first part, is to try and summarize what we covered in that first segment. We can summarize that in 6 basic points. 1, that even though the title sounds very general, dealing with difficult questions, we actually mean here difficult questions about Islam, beliefs, worship, teaching, and way of living. Secondly, the fact that the focus is on Islam and its teachings, it does not mean that it is only geared to questions by Muslims or from Muslims, but also other faith communities or non-faith communities even, for that matter. In fact, we might say even it deals with questions that could help any person whatsoever who's seeking the truth. The third point, is that we started by raising a very key and important question that must have occurred to the mind of any human being, for that matter, especially in youthful years when a person is trying to determine his or her identity. And basically this is called, in the jargon of these topics, as world view. Basically what it means, what is the view of a person, atheist, believer, you name it, any person. What is his or her view in the world in which we're living? Related to that, who am I? Who am I? What is exactly my identity? What is my nature as a human being, distinct from other creation of Allah? And what is exactly is my mission on earth, other than the normal cycle of birth, growth, death, and so on? Is there some meaning to life than this cycle? The fourth point, in summary, is that we said that from an Islamic perspective, and as personally being inspired, alhamdulillah, by Surah Sajda, the first few ayat in the Sajda, Surah Sajda, which is the 32nd surah in the Quran, that it deals in essence with 3 interdependent, interrelated components of the human being. They're not separate segments, but they are related. 1 is the material part, the body, the needs of the body, the desires of the body. Secondly, reason. I say you can say aql, but I think I prefer to translate it as reason, and the tools also for that reason, such as hearing and sight and so on. But then we said something distinct in this ayat deals with a third aspect that is commonly neglected, if not marginalized. And that is the spiritual aspect of the human being that we find not only in Surah Al-Sajdah, but we find it also in the story of creation of the first human, Adam. وَنَفَخَ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِ, that Allah breathed into the human something of His Spirit. The Spirit that Allah created. It's not the Spirit of Allah that incarnate in humans. This is totally outside. This is the spiritual part of the human being. The fifth point in summary is that when we try to relate all these general aspects of the human and components of the human, there is a practical implication to that. That everybody is looking for some identity, looking for what he or she considers to be the truth. Everybody is trying to define their own way of living and philosophy of life. It is in that context, the practical applied context, that we can say, and this is not a mere claim or a partisan claim, but based on study and dialogues for several decades, I say it with full conviction that the most valid way of living is that supports and satisfies all these three elements of the human being: material, reason, and spirit. In not only catering to those three needs, because there could be all kinds of claims, but in a way that is balanced, that does not give overemphasis of one element over the other. Consider it all. Why is that? Well, first of all, that answer could be a whole presentation by itself, but again, I'm trying to be as concise as possible, as many issues, inshallah, will arise in the future. Number one, as far as fulfilling the realistic human needs and instincts, there is no problem with that, so long as it is within what Allah made lawful to us, because the unlawful is done also to preserve the body. And when Allah says, don't take any narcotics, it is not just because it's a religious teaching or whatever. It is actually catering to the need of that body that could be damaged and destroyed, especially the brains, by taking narcotics, for example. So Islam, yes, the needs are not to be guilty about, whether it's food or whether it is relationship between male and female for the reproduction of the human race, the desires. There is no shame about them. Only two conditions we both of them are found in the Quran. One, it isn't halal. That's why Islam encourages getting married and so on. Whoever is able to support the family, he should. So there is no guilt like Freudian psychology on this matter at all. And the second qualifier, which is also for the benefit of the human being. We can remember the ayah, for example, in the Quran, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ. Eat and drink, but don't do things in excess. So even if it's halal, permissible, excesses and waste are forbidden. So it is in that sense there is a balanced and realistic, not just an ivory tower thing, realistic recognition of human needs within these guidelines that make that body even stronger and more productive. Secondly, it is Islam also that caters to the need of reason or mind, our curiosity, our desire to think freely and discover the creation of Allah. And examples were given, so I just mentioned very quickly that the first word revealed in the Quran in Surah Al-Alaq, the 96th Surah, Iqra, which means recite or read, and there is mention of the pen as a tool of learning. The word Al-Allama, Ya'lam, all of these words are related to knowledge. And there is absolutely no restriction that Islam imposes on the human being in understanding, analyzing, and even harnessing for good causes what Allah created in this universe. And the ayat in the Quran are by the dozens about learning, thinking, reflecting. So there's nothing, no scripture that I know of has as much emphasis on this thinking, seeking evidence. Hatu burhanakum in kuntum sadiqin. Bring forth your evidence if indeed you say the truth. So there's no problem with that in the area where the mind is equipped to understand and discover. But then we stopped at the third element that, as mentioned earlier, seemed to be either neglected or marginalized or imbalanced as compared to the importance of the first two components. That is the spiritual element of the human being. We noted also that while the first word or verses in the Quran, the first 5 ayahs in Surah Al-Alaq, deal with learning, and lots of ayat deal of learning and understanding and discovering and all of that, that all of these relate to only one of the two worlds that some people try to limit it to one word. One is the material world, that is ash-shahada. In the Quran speaking about alimul ghaybi wa shahada, Allah who has perfect knowledge of ghayb, the things that are beyond the limits of our human mind and intelligence and perception. wa shahada, something that's material. So it is that ghayb that is really worthy of stopping at, as it was noted, my humble observation, in fact, for a lot of time I kept thinking about that in the final order of the Quran, it was not organized according to the chronology or the history of revelation, because otherwise Surah Al-Alaq or this ayat could have been instead of Fatiha or Al-Baqarah. But this matter that has great wisdom that we covered in detail many months back, maybe last year, on a special series on the Quran. But to put it very concisely, we say that in the Quran, after Al-Fatiha, which is almost like dua for Allah to guide us the straight path, and after the brief introduction of the surah Alif Lam Mim, which is an answer to the prayer in Al-Fatiha, the Quran begins to classify people: the believers, the rejectors of faith knowingly, and those who are misguided, even though they might be following something that relates to revelation. But there are, the third is the munafiqeen, to start with. Munafiqeen, the hypocrites. And when the Quran begins with al-muttaqeen, the first description or trait is الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, it's guidance to the muttaqeen, to be muttaqi, to have that belief and faith in Allah. The Quran is the guidance. And the first trait, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ, those who believe in the unseen. It didn't say those who believe in Shahada. An atheist, he believes that there is bodies, there are stars, there are this, because these are tangible or understood or seen objects. But the real test of faith really is to believe in addition, not instead of. Islam doesn't say, no, don't believe in material at all. No. In addition to understanding the material world, including our own bodies, a true muttaqeen believe in al-ghayb. Ghayb from man ghaba, ma ghaba anhu, things that are beyond them. Beyond them, actually, could even something that relate to the material world even, part of it. For example, can any scientist tell how many species Allah created already, organisms or microorganisms? Nobody claimed that at all. I mean, they discover and add to the list and try to put families of, creation. So even in our world, material world, we cannot see or perceive everything that we see. And even if we can, sometimes, as indicated last time also, our perception could be misled. We imagine things sometimes, we see what we want to see. So this is something psychologists and others had experiments on that. Not everybody sees the same thing the same way. There are some cases, yes, but I guess there are differences. But of course, this is not the ghaib really that the ayah seem to be dealing with as a test of faith, to believe in something you don't see, you can't hear, okay? You can't reason it fully according to the limited knowledge and capacity of human brain, but based on your fitra, natural, innate, or the innate nature, pure innate nature that Allah has given you as a human being, you can accept it, but you cannot exactly prove it or touch it or put it in a laboratory. This is the test of faith. And this is something that we ended with. And today, inshallah, we begin by adding also that believing in this ghaib does not mean believing in superstitious things, does not believe in something that's self-contradictory in a way that can never be reconciled. And if you remember, two terms I used to use also when teaching the Islamic courses in the university, they say that there is something that you could call totally irrational. To speak about two things in a way that you cannot make any sense of it, like 1 + 1 is equal to 37.5. And I used to say that no matter what kind of mathematical acrobats you're playing, everybody knows that this is a false statement. Speaking straightforward, 1 + 1 is 2. Maybe 1 times 1 is 1, but that's a different issue altogether. And even then, 1 times 1 doesn't make 3 or 5. So these are mustahilat aqliyya, something that's totally impossible, really, to accept. But there is something, perhaps, that can be called supra-rational. Supra doesn't mean against rationality, but beyond the limits of our rationality. You cannot prove it true, you cannot prove it false. So that's where faith comes in. Of course, the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How could you prove to someone who believes only in material world or his own logic, mind, no matter how intelligent or knowledgeable he or she is, can prove definitively that Allah exists or does not exist? Mind you, a person who's open to truth, who's guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can, or even by pure fitra, pure innate nature, even by just a simple reflection without any indoctrination from any source, knows that this universe, with all it contains and the way it's operating, and the human body, it did not create itself, nor it came from nothing. So there must be creator for that matter. It's a very good argument. You can I'm not saying there are not. There are lots of arguments. The Quran is full of arguments. But can you prove it to someone who considers any so-called revelation as superstition? Prophets, this is false history. How could you prove to him if he's imprisoned only with the two first components, the body and limited human reason? How could you prove it to him? Impossible. But can he also definitively prove that there is no God? So these are major differences. It may sound like the same, but in fact, it is not really the same. Now, today also we can add that it's not only a prerequisite to be muttaqi, hudan lil muttaqin, one who's Allah conscious because of this divine breath in him or her, but a person even cannot be a Muslim even if he does not admit or consider the importance of that third element, the spiritual element of the human being. Why? I'm not talking about taqwa or iman even Muslim. You notice that the term, whether in adjectives or nouns or verbs, for example, Islam, Muslim, Muslima, Yuslim, whatever form of these words, these are all derived from the same root. Notice here I find some writers say Islam comes from peace. That is not the correct one, really. The roots in Arabic do not have vowel signs. For example, the root from the word Islam is not Islam itself. It's not peace. That's one of the root is not any of those derivatives, and usually, like I said, doesn't have vowel signs. So the origin of the term Islam is S-L-M. In English sound, in Arabic called Sin, Lam, Mim. No vowel signs. It is only when you start putting vowel signs or put letters in the beginning, in the middle, or the end, then it becomes derived. For that reason, to understand what does the word Islam mean, or Yuslim, the verb Yuslim means, you have to find out the generic meaning of that root. What does S-L-M or Sin Lam mean? It means yes, and everybody knows that, especially in recent years, talking about peace and so on. Yes, one is peace. That's one generic meaning. But the other meaning that some people either forget or neglect is submission. Submission, not to a human being, not to customs of people regardless, but submission above all to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are some scholars who argue also that Sin Lam Mim or SLM means is purity also. An ayah in the Quran, وَرَجُلًا سَلَمًا لِرَجُلٍ. Salaman actually means purely, so that has a secondary meaning also. It is for that reason that I'm very much inclined, and alhamdulillah, that I found it practically useful in summing up the nature of Islam in one sentence. If that's all you have, what Islam mean? Based on this root, at least the first two meaning of SLM, it is seeking peace. You can elaborate a little bit. What peace? Peace with Allah, which is the foundation, resulting in inner peace within the human. Resulting, if a person is true but not just paying lip service, I am a Muslim. No. If a person is really serious about it, means also peace with all the creation of Allah. Oh, you mean Muslims? Yes, Muslims are part of it. People who are not Muslims are part of it. The world of animals is part of it. the world of resources and vegetation. All of this, because these are all creation of Allah. So it means peace with Allah and with all the creation of Allah, whether you consider that part of the environment, part of this, but this. You find texts in the Quran and Hadith about how to relate to all of this creation of Allah. Or harmony with Allah, peace with Allah, and all the creation of Allah. How? Through willing, not forced, choosing to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And submission to Allah is not only by performing ibadat, no matter how important it is, but full submission to Allah. That submission in the context of things that we've been talking about in last time and this time, that submission not only in the alam al-shahada, in the seen, tangible or material world, but submission also of the soul, or more correctly, the spirit of the person to its creator, even though we have not seen him, we have not touched him. Hasha lillah, he is above us. So that what generates that qabul and acceptance, and even to be worthy of called Muslim. Then something shocking, a little bit. I have been following for decades, but more importantly recently, even when the Sheikh Abdullah asked me or suggested to deal with shubuhat. So from what I found in social networking and all of that, written, there are things that are rather shocking. And I'm not talking only about something recent. I remember, without mentioning any names or anything, that goes back to, for example, in Halifax, since I came to Canada, I was in US before that, that we had a family that was close to us, husband and wife. Alhamdulillah, they pray and fast and everything. And one time we were sitting down and talking, and the wife of that brother, she tells me, Islam is unfair to women. Why a woman inherits half the man? But this, inshallah, will answer later about whether there is a general rule in the Quran like that, which is not true, by the way. There's no general rule that a female, regardless, inherits half. Inshallah, we'll get into that. But I'm just focusing on her expression, Islam is unfair. Now, I told her that if the one who legislated that is a human being or groups of human beings, yes, they could possibly be biased, like men making laws to favor themselves and to oppress women or whatever. It's found in history. If that was the case, your expression of being unfair may be considered, can be uttered at least. Can they be regarded as unfair? Then I told her that this is not any human's opinion. It is not even, if it's not even the rules that came from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are references in hadith to that, but the basis for that is in the Quran. And for you, respected sister, believe in the Quran, don't you? I said, yes. He said, this is direct mentioned in the Quran. So the fact that some people might have misunderstood it or misapplied it, but I cannot say the Quran is unfair to women or Islam, because that could mean equivalence of saying, Hasha lillah, Allah is unfair. I thought Allah is neither male or female. He doesn't have our human biases. Allah is the absolute just. So the question here is why we try to understand, but not to say, I will not accept this ayah in the Quran unless you explain to me fully what really does it mean. as if we're holding Allah hashallah hostage. You know, tell me, I'll follow you, but only if my mind fully accepts it. So submission here means in alam al-ghayb also. There are things that are hidden from us. We don't know its wisdom. We search, we're not restricted from searching. And in the initial search, we may find that we were wrong in this kind of conclusion. So this is something, like I said, would be a shocker. I've seen people saying things like this. This ayah in the Quran, I don't approve of it. I don't agree with it. Ya akhi, you're free to agree or disagree, to believe in Allah or not to believe in Allah. But to say, I am a Muslim, which means I believe in the Quran, that this is the word of Allah, then I say, I don't agree. As if I'm telling Allah, I have a better solution, better word than you're telling me. I am an open-minded, I'm modernizing, and I'm, subhanallah. I heard or read something even more terrible. Not only I disagree with the Quran, I think this ayah makes us uncomfortable. We cannot make good da'wah with this ayah. I think it should be purged from the Quran. It should be removed to protect Islam. Sometimes they come with apparently statements of goodwill to protect Islam from misunderstanding and bad name. Maybe a few ayat, throw them out. Subhanallah. You know, human beings, when they write books sometimes or articles, they send it to an experienced editor. And that editor, because of experience and knowledge, say, no, you want to improve your article so that it is publishable? No, reword this. Throw away that sentence. Correct this because it's wrong. Or not. Clarify this. Editors for human is understood. But to be an editor of Allah and His book, it is unimaginable. Allah said that? No, I can improve on it. This ayah out. This ayah should be worded differently because people may misunderstand. SubhanAllah. I don't need to go more and more into that, but it is a reality that I've seen even in recent kind of Islamophobic. I don't want to get into that now, but maybe toward the end or sometimes later, that there is an organized effort, well-funded, recruiting people with Muslim names who even study Islamiyat to design a sort of new Islam that doesn't pay any attention to rules of interpretation and so on, something that fit. And some of those are major religious organizations in the world. It includes also politicians in some countries, especially in the Western world as well, that had that desire to, design a modern Islam. It's almost like when you go to the tailor. Very few people can afford that now. Anyway, but those of us coming from Muslim countries know it. You go to the tailor and you want to have a suit. So you go and choose, I want this material and this color and this cut and this that. So there are some people also apparently are so obsessed and over proud to the point of vanity, if not arrogance, that I'm a free thinker, I'm a reader, I know this, I know that. So I want to have an Islam like a suit. I want this part of Islam with this color, with this design. Okay? It fits mine. And of course, the tailor does not only make a suit for one person. There are lots of customers. So again, that cannot be a standard for everyone. So everyone can make their own deen And all of a sudden you end up with 7 billion. Okay, maybe not all are religious, maybe 40% if you take the Catholics and Muslims, the largest two groups. You know, hundreds of billions of minds, if it's the philosophy or the approach they do. However, I'd like to say that no matter how much those provocative statements contradict the basics of Islam, I would not encourage anyone, as I've seen sometimes in very bad type of debates, even though the debates, part of the debates is represent Islam, is to begin with making personal accusations, because that drive people away and make them insolent, also insisting on their batil. Nor we are speaking here in the context of takfir or tafsir, to declare this as a kafir. You know, I have seen some ulama that I thought they are wiser than that. They had great knowledge, but once they're provoked with this, very amazing questions, they accuse others of being kafir or fasiq, even though it could be that, theologically speaking. Number one, not to personalize the debate. Number two, instead of accusation, even that might be well deserved, why not focus on the positive things, on making da'wah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? To take example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that people, he did not come violently, but belittled his message, they denied that he's a prophet. Like Musaylama al-Kadhab is known as Musaylama the liar, who go to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, say, the world is too big, so maybe we can be both prophets. A sort of maybe shifts, prophet for 12 hours and another for 12. الدنيا واسعة. But he, in some cases, of course, he used strong language when it comes to the fundamentals of Aqidah. But oftentimes he let people ask, and if they're really searching for truth, it's not just a challenge or for the sake of attack, he listened to them. And in fact, let's leave even 1% possibility that that person who's saying these things may turn out to be a believer. Because to get into the negative side, no, you're kafir. How could you say this, and that? You can quote from the Quran to show that he's kafir, that's fine. But in reality, he won't listen to you. I'm not saying to compromise any truth at all, but to say, let's talk. The Quran, for example, in Surah Al-Imran, I think it's ayah 64, with the people of the book, with major differences, not in the belief in God, but the major differences about Tawheed versus Trinity, for example, and so on. Still the Quran says, قل يا أهل الكتاب تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم ألا نعبد إلا الله ولا نشرك به شيئا ولا يتخذ بعضنا بعضا أربابا من دون الله فإن تولوا فقولوا اشهدوا بأننا مسلمون. This is a very great ayah. All the Quran is great, but this especially is very helpful in dealing مع المخالف, مع those who differ and reject true faith, as we understand. It says, say, meaning, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the address is to us also, as his followers. O people of the book, come to a common terms, common word between you and us, that we worship none but Allah, that we don't take each other as lords instead of Allah. If they turn away, it didn't say kill them, it didn't say you kuffar and this and this and that. Say فَقُولُوا اشْهَدُوا بِأَنَّا مُسْلِمُونَ. They're still peaceful with you. Say to them, bear witness that we are Muslim. It doesn't take kill them, and the kafir should be killed, as some people think mistakenly, which is totally un-Quranic, inshallah. We'll come to the issue of violence down the line, inshallah. So that's what I'm saying, the gentleness, but no compromise on faith. But then let's talk about it. Let's talk, maybe. Okay. طيب. It is for that reason that the last thing we hope to cover in this session, inshallah, are few fundamentals that we have to start with and see whether there is agreement to that. If there is no agreement, then the issue then becomes discussion: does Allah exist? Does Allah reveal His will to people or not? Are all these prophets in history people who lied or appointed themselves prophets? So this, and forgive me if I start with basis, because I'm sure you know this, but I might expand a little bit on it very briefly. But it is perhaps maybe some tips as to how to deal with people, even who are not Muslims, or Muslims who are misled. You hear Muslims today say, declare themselves atheists. I've heard some debates that they had with some of the Shuyukh al-Azhar. And again, not to make it too long, inshallah, I did first with 3 basics that should be the beginning point. And the person can determine. La ikrah fi din, no compulsion. 1, to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the sole creator, sustainer, and cherisher of the universe, who has no equal, who does not incarnate in any physical form, as summarized in Surah Al-Ikhlas. Ikhlas actually means purity or sincerity. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. It's very short but very succinct. Say, O Muhammad, Allah is, it didn't say wahid, ahad. Ahad means not only one, but one and unique, because you can have so many ahads, 5, 6 ahads who are God. La, ahad, the one and only worthy God that's worthy of worship. Allahu Samad, meaning that He doesn't depend on anyone, and everyone depends on Him. Existence of humans and matter depends on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but He doesn't need anyone Himself. Lam yalid wa lam yulad, He was not, He begets not, nor was He begotten, and there is nothing. Kufwan ahad. Kufwan means like kuf'an. Some qira'at also kuf'an. Kufwan means equal, which is emphasized in the Quran also, as I just coming in the second point. Secondly, a person who say, I'm a Muslim but I'm misled, do you believe in all the attributes of Allah, al-Asma' al-Husna, which includes, among many, the 99, includes complete knowledge, complete wisdom, complete will, and that Allah alone is the ultimate authority for all. Thirdly, that Allah has many attributes that we cannot understand it exactly in our limited human understanding or perception. For example, mercy, justice, love, sight, hearing, and all of these. Yes, the Quran used these terms only to bring it closer to our understanding, but the justice of Allah is not the way I define justice. I'm not saying unjust. He's just, but in His own ultimate way and knowledge. So this is why the Quran says to close any door for imagining Allah in any physical or limited form. That's a word, the accurate word for that in English, but forget it, it's not that important. It's called anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism actually literally means to imagine Allah after as a human being. Okay? So when it says Allah Yadullahi ma'al jama'ah, the hand of Allah is with the group. That you imagine, 5 fingers or a human hand. Okay, that's why the Asha'ira, sometimes they overly criticize, but actually most of the Azhar scholars, and Nawawi, the great commentator on Hadith, actually take part of maybe some Ash'ari's explanations in some areas are not acceptable or questionable, but actually they said something that is sensible here. They say that to avoid people having this anthropomorphic, or to imagine Allah as just another man like us, as you find, for example, some of the medieval paintings. One of the popes asked Michelangelo to make that painting in one of their huge churches or cathedrals. And Allah, hasha lillah, of course unclothed, but somehow like an old man, obviously an old man with long beard, and extending his hand by his side, and another youthful person, you know what I mean, the father, the son. This is a very, very big, slippery type of road. That's why, like I said earlier, the Quran says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing comparable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Asha'ira opinion on that, they say, yad actually is used in the Arabic language. It's not imposed on the language of the Quran. Sometimes yad means power of Allah. Even in the Bible itself, they say, according to them, that Isa alayhi salam was God, and he came and incarnated in the form of human Jesus, and then was crucified and went to the grave for 3 days. وَصَعَدَ وَجَلَسَ عَلَى يَمِينِ الرَّبِّ. And he went up and sat on the right hand of God. Actually, even in their own expression, imperfect as it may be, Yameen actually referred to power. Okay? When the Quran speaks about the Day of Judgment, it says, وَالسَّمَاوَاتُ مَطْوِيَّاتٌ بِيَمِينِ. If you take it translated literally, say the heavens will all be folded on his right hand. But we all know that it is actually a serious issue to speak on Allah as a physical being, so that he has a right and left. You know what I mean? So this kind of imagination, anthropomorphic, which is very common among many religions, even the religions that believe in Tawheed, in that sense, are only something to bring things to our attention, but it is not identical. And finally, just a couple of words, and inshallah we'll finish still within less than an hour, almost 45 minutes. What happens, or if you want, we can stop at that point, because then we can take that issue in some more detail, because it is delicate and it is very important, and that is, so I leave you with that question. In case a person believes in Allah, so you get Muslims who believe in Allah, they believe in ghaib, both worlds, the world of material, the world of spirit, fine. They also accept, the basic things that we spoke about believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are you telling us then that there could be no, quote unquote, legitimate difference of understanding of some texts of the Quran or probably Hadith? Are you telling us that nobody ever claimed, whether the claim is correct or not, claimed that some ayat in the Quran contradict the other ayat? Are you telling us that even some of the most authentic hadith does not appear to contradict another hadith? Is there possibility of any ayah in the Quran that in reality, not as it appears, in reality contradict a sound hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? So even if we accept all of that, how to deal with this? Is there guidelines in the